Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we will continue with the Arab Revolution of 2011. So you might wonder, ladies and gentlemen, what is exactly going on in these Arab countries? These rulers have been there for many, many years, and I guess the longest sitting Arab leader would be Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. As a matter of fact, I don't believe we will see what took place in Cairo. I don't believe it will happen in Libya, as the Libyan regime will survive this one, even probably if he has to kill half of the country. He has a pretty good security system around him, so which would be that's the West Bank. Now that is the part where the Palestinians want to have a state and the Israelis want that whole piece. They don't want to have a Palestinian state in the West Bank or in Gaza, which is that little strip to the left or to the west of Israel there between Israel and Egypt. So the Palestinian state, for 60 years now, the Palestinians have been trying to have a state of their own. Israel is steadfastly standing that they will not have a Palestinian state. They will not permit a Palestinian state to go on in the West Bank. Well, what are they doing in the West Bank? They are building settlements. Now, let me remind everyone, and we do have pictures to show you these settlements they are building all over the West Bank. In the 1970s, there were only 1,100. In 1972, there were 1,100 settlers in the West Bank. The Zionist organization, the World Zionist Organization, at that time put out a plan. The plan of that, it was called the Israel Strategies in the 1980s. And also you can find that plan on the internet by actually going and researching Israel's plan or the Zionist plan for the Middle East. We've talked about this plan many times on the program, and everybody was very much, saying, no, it's not going to happen. Well, let me tell you, what we are witnessing right now in the Middle East is an execution of that plan. Now, let me repeat. What we are witnessing in the Middle East right now is an execution of that plan. You might say, wait a minute, it doesn't make sense. Why would Israel actually remove Hosni Mubarak, who was very much their friend? They signed an agreement. Well, actually, he continued the Sadat agreement with him. He was very much giving the United States everything they needed. He was very much giving everything to the Israelis that they needed. Well, the problem is, it is time to change the map. It is time for the new Middle East that the neocons have talked about when they talked about the clean break, which is Israel must become a superpower, a superior country in the Middle East. Israel, in its plan, said we cannot destroy these countries from the outside by the classical conventional means, but if we work on these fault lines that they identified in every country they identified those fault lines. In Bahrain, they said, Bahrain today, it is happening. They said that in Bahrain the majority of the populations were Shiites. At that time, they said 80% of Bahrain were Shiites, 20% Sunnis. That's in late 1970s. Now it's 70-30. It's still, but who's in power? A Sunni Muslim over Shiite Muslims. Now, there was no problem all these years, but the problem or the situation, the fault lines were there. Even though you did not have any earthquakes going on, but the fault line, it doesn't mean the fault lines don't exist beneath the surface. All they had to do is just move those fault lines a little bit. In Iraq, and they said Iraq must go first. They said it. They said removal of Saddam Hussein's regime from Iraq is an Israeli objective in its own right in the clean break. They said that removal of Saddam Hussein, it will get that fault line in action. They said Iraq will be divided into 3, possibly 4 different countries. What are we noticing now in Iraq? Exactly that. They said you will have a Sunni state, a Kurdish state, you will have a Shiite state possibly too, because the Shiites are divided almost in half. Now, who drew that map to put all these different people together in one country? England and France during the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Who drew the maps and put all these people together in Bahrain and got these royal families to be the kings there? Well, Great Britain did. Now, Saudi Arabia, the same thing. Who put all these, who drew the Sudan the way they drew it? England. Going back to the settlers, because everything you see in the Middle East revolves around Palestine. The Palestinians, now back in 1992 during the Madrid peace conference, Itzhak Shamir was the prime minister, and he came to that peace conference, the Madrid peace conference, and he very much flat out told the Arab delegates there that he was supposedly negotiating with, don't talk about, you want to talk about peace, we'll talk about peace, but don't talk about territories. Leave the territories alone. And he very much told reporters from Ma'ariv, the Israeli newspaper at that time, that, and it was reported by the LA Times and many other newspapers at that time, he very much told them that he's going to drag, we'll get these people talk, we'll talk to them about peace, we'll drag it for 10 years, and by that time we will have 500,000 Jewish settlers in the mountains of Judea and Samaria. Now, what is Judea and Samaria? That is the West Bank. They did say in the 70s, the World Zionist Organization did say that our survival in Israel depends upon populating the mountains in Judea and Samaria. This is way back. And they said, our survival depends on populating the mountains in Judea and Samaria. And they added, now it is empty of the Jewish people. At that time, there was no Jews living in Judea and Samaria in early 70s. In 1972, there were 1,100 settlers living in the West Bank, closer to Jerusalem. Okay? Right now, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about 1992 until now. There are about 650 to 700,000 Israeli illegal settlers living on the West Bank, living in the West Bank. Finally, the Palestinian Authority is actually convinced that we cannot continue with this, because Israel has no intentions of stopping or freezing building these settlements on the land. So what did the Palestinians do? They went to the world and stopped. Now, the Palestinians, in a last effort, said, well, wait a minute. Israel has no intention. So we've got to go, before it's too late, we've got to go to the world, we've got to go to the United Nations, and if the Palestinians would have the required number of countries to recognize their country, the United Nations will recognize Palestine, and Palestine will become a country. Now, almost every country on the United Nations Security Council would sign yes to a Palestinian state on the 1967 border or borders in Palestine, which is the mountains, the areas where the settlements are. That's where Israel is settling their people. So if they recognize it, then of course, I mean, Israel will do what Israel wants to do. Even if the whole world recognized Palestine, no one can make Israel leave those. But if the whole world decides, look, Palestine must be there and must go on, then you will have a problem. Israel will have a problem actually in maintaining its dignity and maintaining its respectability in the world. So what did they do? The Palestinians, when they found out that, hey, look, the United States might veto a new Palestinian state in the 1967 borders. So what they decided that, hey, look, we'll go through this. If it doesn't work, then we have other options, which is to have the General Assembly actually vote on a Palestinian state. And if the General Assembly votes on it, it will pass. Definitely it will pass. And that is where Israel has a problem. And Israel had to do something before the Palestinians can actually get the chance to get the world around them to go into Palestine and have a Palestinian state. Because it was a fact that the Palestinians were going to the United Nations, and it was a fact that many nations around the world started recognizing a Palestinian state over 1967. Almost all of South America recognized a Palestinian state. All Muslims and Arab countries recognize the Palestinian state. Almost all Southeast Asia recognized the country. Africa. The whole world would have voted, and there was nothing that Israel and the United States could have done to stop a Palestinian state from being born. They had to change the whole thing. They had to change the whole area. How did they do it? Well, everything, these fault lines we talked about, were already underneath and beneath the surface in all of these countries. If Israel can remove Hosni Mubarak out of the way, now, look, let's make one thing perfectly, for those of you who are not getting this theory. The people in Egypt went out and removed a dictatorship that has been oppressing them for over 30 years. There's no question about it. That was in Egypt. It is a people's revolution. All over the Middle East, it is people's revolution with their legit grievances against the government. No question about it. It had to be done now to stop a Palestinian state from being born. How is that? Simple. Change the regime in Egypt. The regime in Egypt was the strongest ally to the Palestinians in the West Bank. It was like Big Brother. It was the one that they went to when they had a problem with the Israelis. They would go to the Egyptians would interfere with the Israelis and the United States, etc., and they will put things back. There was no one else standing with the Palestinians. Now, of course, all the Arab people are standing with their brothers in Palestine. There's no question about it. Now, the government, each government treated the Palestinians separate based on and depending on their own interest, not the interest of the Palestinians, not the interest of their own, but the interest of their own regimes. That's how they treated the Palestinians. Let's get back to why Israel wanted this. Israel would love nothing more than to have a regime in Egypt that is not friendly to Israel. They don't want a friendly regime, and everything is ripe for a not so friendly regime in Egypt. So you have a lot of people in the Middle East who wanted to be liberated, who wanted to be free. The last thing these people want is to be friendly with Israel. And that will work 100% for Israel. That will work. Because Israel doesn't want friendly, they don't want, this is what they want to do. They want the regime in Egypt to be more friendly to Hamas than the Palestinian Authority. They want the regime, of course, the regime in Syria is already not. In Iraq is already not. They have Al Jazeera, which is wearing down this vicious animal, tearing down the Palestinians in the West Bank. Now you have this Arab revolution. The Palestinians in the West Bank, they're going to be unpopular in the Arab streets. Why? Because they have been negotiating with Israel and they're not getting anything. Now the Arab streets wants to pull back, which leaves the Palestinians in the West Bank an easy target for the Israelis, because they don't want a friendly regime that will interfere with them, because Hosni Mubarak was actually interfering with them. They don't want that. They want a regime that can, and by the way, Iran today, for the first time since the Iranian Revolution, since the Shah was removed, Iran asked to send 2 warships through the Suez Canal. Look how this dirty game is being played. Look how this dirty game is being played. Now the Egyptians, because the Supreme Military Council said that we are going to honor all agreements with all countries. Now, did the Iranians, when Mubarak, did they try to pass military ships through the Suez Canal, and the Egyptians said no? But now they want to send, I guess, just let them go into the Mediterranean and then come back, turn around and come back. That's the first time that the Iranians want to flex their muscles through the Suez Canal. Well, the impression that's going to be drawn there that, oh wow, since Mubarak left, then you have this government in Egypt is letting the Iranians pass through there with their warships. Wow. Relationships between Egypt and Israel is going to be strained. It's going to be not a so good of a relationship. And then what happens? You guessed it. Then there's nobody to protect the Palestinian Authority that finds itself squeezed there. Now, Jordan, well, the Zionist agenda has always said that Palestine is in Jordan. And it will not take but few hours to remove the Jordanian regime, the family, from power. Okay? They said that. I mean, this is not something new. They have said that. They have said by the removal of the family, the royal family in Jordan, then you have the Palestinians, who, by the way, make about 70% of the population in Jordan. Well, they're not going to do it now. And by the way, the Jordanian king, King Abdullah, had called Obama a couple of days ago, well, a few days back, and he was very worried. Look, am I the next one on the line here? Obama told him, no, you're okay. And Obama even sent William Burns, the second man in the State Department, and he sent Michael Mullins, the chief of staff. He sent them both to talk and calm down the fears and the nerves of the Jordanian king just last Sunday. Now, by eliminating Egypt, what will happen is the Palestinian Authority would have not many choices unless it dissolves itself and it goes and it moves out or stays in. They can decide that for themselves and continue with this recognition thing until and move as fast as they can, because Israel is moving as fast as it can to change everything in the Middle East to its advantage. And the Palestinians, because Israel said their own survival depends on populating the mountains of Judea and Samaria. Israel said, and they said this, that all these Arab countries, in their plan, they said this, the plan that I'm talking about, they said this, that in their plan, they actually had they talked about all these countries a long time ago, like it's like a deck of cards. This thing is very complicated, that you've got to be looking at it from the outside. You cannot be inside the box of Egypt. You cannot be inside the box of Palestine. You cannot be inside the box of Iraq or Syria or Libya or Bahrain or Tunisia. You've got to see this as a whole piece, because there are no other ways to look at it. Why did the United States pay millions of dollars to these organizations in Egypt through the so-called U.S. aid? Many of these organizations are not even registered in Egypt, but they are getting help from U.S. aid, millions of dollars being sent there by the United States to allow for this change, allow for this revolution. Why $15 million of George Soros' money went there to create an organization for Mohammed al-Baradei? Why millions of dollars from Iran went to Egypt? I mean, Iran is spending millions of dollars recruiting people to destabilize the country from within. Is there an agreement between these powers? Because remember, enemies can and will. Enemies can and will split the pie. Talk about compromises. Well, the situation that's going to be happening in the Middle East, is it suitable for Iran? Yes, it is. It's wonderful news for Iran. Is it suitable for America and the Zionists? Yes, it is. It's wonderful news for Israel and the United States. Of course, when we say the United States, really, we are nothing but a tool in the hand of the Zionists. Now, well, I hope you followed what we talked about, and I hope you realize that something like this does not happen. Look, Tweety Bird did not make this happen. So Twitter and Facebook did not make this happen. Yeah, they might have got people out in the streets more, but this is no Tweety. You know what? If this revolution was more of an industrial revolution, was it more of an economic revolution? Are we going to have better jobs in Egypt? Are we going to have, probably, are we going to have Egypt grow its own wheat now, as they used to? Because Egyptians used to grow their own wheat. And I always said, if you do not grow your the food you eat, if you have to depend on somebody else to feed you, you are not liberated. And you can say whatever you want about whatever revolution you want. If you cannot sustain yourself and stand up on your own 2 feet, you're not liberated. If you still requiring the United States to feed you and clothe you, you're not liberated. I don't care what kind of regime you have. Well, I know I made many people out there probably open their eyes, because you've got to be and have an open mind, especially those people in the Middle East and those people watching us here in the United States of Middle Eastern descent. You've got to do it. You've got to look at what is happening. I know it is emotional. I know it's a great thing to do. I know you think this is it. I do too. And let's hope that this is it. Well, with all this is all we have for you tonight, and we will see you, I guess, next time.